The all-new FreshBooks is not only ridiculously easy to use, it's also packed full of powerful features. FreshBooks has created a super intuitive tool that makes creating and sending invoices ridiculously easy. You can use FreshBooks to create and send invoices in about 30 seconds. There's no formatting and no formulas, just really simple, clean, professional-looking invoices. You can add your logo and color scheme so that your invoices reflect your brand. When you email a client an invoice, FreshBooks can show you whether they've seen it, which puts an end to the guessing games. There's also a super handy deposit feature, so you can invoice for a payment up front when you're kicking off a project. If waiting for client checks in the mail is slowing down your cash flow, with literally 2 clicks, you can set yourself up to receive payments online. Oh, and your clients will love paying by credit card straight from their invoice. FreshBooks is offering a 30-day unrestricted free trial to my listeners. To claim it, just go to freshbooks.com/mytaughtyou and enter My Taught You in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Hey guys, this is my leak. This is the My Taught You podcast. Long time no chat. I'm back today with a very special Q&A podcast. And this time, I felt like the questions were pretty complex. So I wanted to call on my buddy Jor-El Caraballo, who has been on our past podcast talking about psychotherapy. Jor-El is a licensed mental health counselor in New York State. He's trained in psychological counseling. So, Jor-El, welcome back. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So before we get into our questions today, I feel like I have noticed a shift in the perception of therapy. And I wondered if you feel like you're seeing a shift because you're in the profession. Do you feel like people are starting to maybe have more conversations or feel like you don't have to be quote unquote crazy to go to therapy?
Yeah, for sure. I think, over the past year, I've seen and had the opportunity to talk with so many more people, especially Black folks, people of color, about mental health and therapy. And I think that there's just so much more information out there. More people are sharing in sort of like public forums. And, and I think it's really great because it does help destigmatize this idea of, therapy or counseling being about being crazy or like having these severe or extreme issues. And the reality is that it can, therapy can do a range of things and it can, help a range of different issues or concerns. And so I've definitely seen a shift in the perception for sure.
Awesome. So I guess for those of us who still don't quite get how it works, and I don't even know that I fully know, but but I was like, can you tell us just a little bit about what we should expect, to help manage our expectations? Because I think that was like my greatest challenge when I first began therapy is that I'm like, so when am I done baking? Like, when do I,
yeah.
when am I fixed? And it's like, you're not broken. It's just like, I think sometimes people go and they may have 1 session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions and they don't see these dramatic shifts like they hope to. But I can tell you a little bit about like how I felt like my therapy was working, but I guess I'd love to hear your perspective on like in a very managing expectation way.
Yeah.
What should one expect?
So I'll try and be as concise as possible.
No worries.
It's a big question, but
it is.
I'll say this. I think it depends on how you view therapy and I sort of have 2 ways that I explain this. And I say, some people look at it as, this is the equivalent of the personal trainer for my mind, right? So that's an ongoing sort of process that a lot of people sort of undertake. They say, all right, I'm going to have a gym membership for the rest of my life because this is something I need to invest in, right? There are other people who say, I want to get a trainer because I'm getting married in 3 months and I need to be snatched, right? So,
yes.
So, there's both of those are valid. And so therapy can be both of those. You can come in with a very specific problem or and say listen, I need to resolve this thing. I need to figure this out. And this is how much time I want to do it in.
Okay.
or you can go into therapy and say, I just don't feel satisfied, or I feel like I'm missing something. And that's going to be a different process that's going to include a lot more digging and probably going to be longer in length.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think I took the like personal trainer from my mind approach. Like, I think I was just like, in the beginning, I was like, what am I doing? And then, I feel like now I think I think I am about 5 years into this past August. And I think it has taught me, like, I have never been more content as a human being in my life. And I don't think we really, like, I don't know if I just didn't believe that I can be content because, when you're raised in like chaos and drama, you don't feel comfortable if there's not chaos and drama going on. I remember like one of the first times I went to one of my sessions and I was just like, I ain't got no drama, girl. Like,
right.
and she's like, do I stop coming? And she's like, no, that's okay. That was like that point that I got to where I realized that I don't like, it is okay to not function in chaos and drama and to just, I feel like I have learned how to handle so many things. And I don't know. I feel like I levitate on this like level of Zen, like nothing really phases me.
Yeah.
But I still continue to go. And I always wonder, like, what the heck are we doing or talking about? But I still feel like in those moments where maybe I want to react to something or I'm not sure what I should do, I always know, I'm like, you know what? I can table it till Tuesday. And I feel like that just saves everybody.
Yeah,
like knowing
right.
that I have an outlet, it's like, I don't like my dad said something. I'm like, no, he didn't. Or,
Yep.
and I'm like, I'll just take this up in therapy. And I feel like, number one, it gives me that time for it to sort of like, for the issue to quote, to diffuse. And then I'm like talking about it in a very like rational and mature way, which I like. Yeah.
Sure.
So I love it. But again, thank you for being on. We're going to get into these questions because some of them are long and I really felt like, okay, I really need someone to help me with this. The first one, not too complicated. I'll go ahead and read it. And then I made some notes, but I wanted to know your thoughts.
Sure.
So this young lady, she writes, and she says she's going to cut to the chase. I'm 33 years old and I have a full-time job. I guess you could say it's a career because it is in my field of study, but the pay is very mediocre. I have always been a person with grandiose ideas, but I have been feeling so underwhelmed at my job recently. So I started several side projects that have really given me life. Okay, that might be a bit dramatic, but these other projects are so much more fulfilling and can be more lucrative than my job will ever be. The problem is I feel too small for my ideas. Because I work a full-time job, I can only devote a fraction of my time to these other things. I have received so much affirmation and positive feedback from friends and family and even strangers regarding these side projects that it has become frustrating that I can't spend more time working to grow them. I stay up most nights until at least 2 a.m. and I have to be up the next day for work. While at my job, I find myself trying to squeeze in time for my side projects. I know this is wrong, but my focus is just not at my day job. To add to my already complicated situation, and this is where I was like, I got to call somebody for this one. I had a brain tumor removed a few months ago. I'm doing fine now, which I'm glad you are doing fine. So I'm extremely afraid to go without health insurance and my medical bills are off the chain. I feel so trapped by my capabilities, trapped by time, and trapped by money or the lack thereof. Do you have any advice?
Yeah.
Was, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I got this. This is the classic, people write me this all the time.
Right.
But then when she said she had the brain tumor removed and I'm like, I'm the first person to be like, jump girl, you got this. But then I was just like, oh my God. Yeah. Because as an entrepreneur, I am paying for my health insurance and I gotta be honest, like, I'm 38 now, so my insurance, it goes up every year. And I've been going to the doctor recently and I just think about if I weren't like, apparently I hadn't met my deductible. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes my appointment is like $300 and I'm just like, fortunately I can afford this, but if I were younger or if I couldn't, I don't know. So, I have another answer, but I'm so curious to know what you think.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, I sort of landed on the whole idea about the medical coverage. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
especially given the medical history, like this is serious. And, I think the sort of gut reaction I have to that is that it's perfectly reasonable to prioritize having insurance coverage. Like it's a
Right.
necessity for life, especially given like these really difficult and like, powerful experiences that, she recently had. It's medical insurance is imperative. Like that's not an option. And so I think, so I think that prioritizing that is really important. But I know that also creates some tension between this idea of like potentially branching out and starting to invest more in these other projects. So one of the questions that came to my mind is, well, is it possible that you could have similar coverage if you did make the decision to leave the current job? Like, could you buy that off of your state's marketplace, or, would that be accessible to you, and would it be affordable? So maybe doing some of like the research that's connected to that, just to have that in your mind, might help make the decision too, if it's going to be worth it or not.
Yeah. I also got stuck on when she said that these things can be more lucrative than her job will ever be.
I caught that
And
too.
and I just underlined that, and I was just like, I almost every single person that I know that is successful today, in their own business, they started it while they had another job. Like I was reading, or no, not reading. I was listening to How I Built This, and Lisa Price was saying she loved her job, and like she'd come home so full of like wanting to do things, and so she started making these products on the side, and then it started to blow up, and so it wasn't like she didn't hate her job. And I think sometimes people have to keep that in mind that, I don't know how this happened, but, we're sold this thing that like our jobs are supposed to quote unquote give us life, right?
Right. Right.
And I mean, I own my own company, and I can tell you some days, a lot of days, it's not giving me life,
Yeah.
And I think that it's very important to have hobbies and to build a life outside of the work that you do, because even if you do become successful doing these side projects, like then you're going to have to hire people. And that's a whole nother, working with different personalities, managing people, insurance, paychecks, getting buildings, rents, like there's a whole other layer to enjoying the work that you do that I think sometimes we miss because, our side things are bringing us so much joy.
Yeah. Well, and I think it can also be easy, for lack of a better term, for those things to be an escape if you're not really happy with the job that you're in. So anything connected to that is going to feel like so wonderful because it's just not the terrible thing that you're doing 40 plus hours a week typically, right? And so there's like that little bit of an escape thing that happens. And so I think that's something to watch out for and say like, well, is it really that these side projects give me life, or is it just that something else is giving me life that work isn't?
Right.
And so I think it's time to like, you kind of have to reflect on that idea a little bit too.
I know. And this is me veering off topic a little bit, but I think that's kind of like how sort of like cheating in relationships happen,
For sure.
right? Yeah, it's like, this is just what this is. It's an escape versus like, I'm so deeply in love, I want to break everything up and move in with so-and-so. Yeah, I have, okay.
Yep.
Okay, so this next question, I literally was like, I have no notes for this. I was just like, because I know what I have to say is not right. But I'm going to read this question, and I was like, I'm going to let the professional handle this. Okay, so she says that her question is about my question is about my living situation with my fiance and his family. I have 2 daughters with him. I feel like you're going to have to pull out some paper to understand who's all living in this house.
Yeah, it took me a minute.
Yeah. So this is a living situation with her fiance and his family. They have 2 daughters together. His mother-in-law, father, 21-year-old brother, his 33-year-old sister, and her 10-year-old son live with us. We rent the home from my father. And I'm 28. My fiance's 29. His parents and brother moved in 6 years ago to save money to buy a home. It was supposed to be for a year. I asked him to ask them to pay rent a year ago and told him to tell them to find a place to live. His sister moved in 8 months ago because she broke up with her boyfriend and had nowhere to go. She has not paid rent, and my fiance says she can pay on October 1st. I'm so tired of this and need help approaching this situation. I don't know what to say without sounding like a B word. Our water and power is $1,700 a month.
Insane. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes. And it's affecting us financially, but he does not see it this way. Should I talk to them? My fiance says he wants to help them, but I feel they are not helping themselves. I'm fed up. They act like this is their home. We said we want our space. If my fiance wants to take care of his family, I can't be with him. He says he's not bothered by it. Let's see. Is this when you should question a relationship? I'm sorry for the babbling mess. My questions are, number one, should I rethink my relationship if he continues to have his family here? Second, should I talk to his family myself? And how do I go about it?
Tough situation all around.
Okay. So I know what I would say and do. Like if this was my girlfriend, I kind of just feel like, this is your fiance and you guys have children together. And I'm like, how is it that all these adults, like the only one that I'm really looking out for is the 10-year-old, the 10-year-old nephew, but it's like mom, mother-in-law, father, brother, it's too much. Sister, all these 30-year-olds and like $1,700 a month, and nobody's paying anything.
Yeah. So, I'm going to level with you and level with this question approach? Is that it's completely unacceptable that people are contributing. Okay. Period.
Like that is number one.
Baseline, like there's no way around that idea.
Right.
To some degree. And that can look like a variety of different things. However, I think that most people think of a family or a unit as people contribute. Like if you're in a collective, you contribute to the collective in whatever way that like is necessary and feels right for the sustainability of that collective. Right. And so if you have all these people who aren't contributing, and we don't necessarily know that they're not doing anything, but it might be worth investigating, like thinking about what are the ways that people can actually contribute and why isn't that happening? Why are the parents? Yeah.
The parents and the brother.
Right. They were supposed to stay there for a year and now it's been 6 years. Like what has happened in that? Like how did that happen? And so I have a lot of questions about like, how do you get to the year mark? And then like someone's like, okay, so like what's going on? And then how does it go from that to it being 6 years later and nothing has changed?
I think some of it is like youth too, right? Mm. So I guess at the time she was 22 when they all moved in. You know what I mean? She's 28 now. And I think sometimes people get caught up. Like, I think sometimes the hardest word to use with family is no, right? Absolutely. Especially, I used to be like that. As long as I have it, you know what I mean? It's like, if I have it, then I should give it, but I don't think that's the case. And so I think there's some youth here, and I don't know, I feel like there's some taken advantage of by these parents, you know. It's just like, what are you doing? You know, and it's her father's house. Right. It's just all around. I just was like, but what does this mean for her relationship if her fiance is just like, don't say anything to my family? Like, do you think she should say something?
I'm kind of on the fence about that, actually. Okay. And so I had like my thought was maybe there's a little bit of a precursor that could happen before that. So what I was thinking about is, because I kept going back to $700 a month.
1,700 for
yeah.
Like Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I was like. I screamed. I would scream at
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Like that's unheard of. And so I kept
Yes.
going back to that and I was thinking, well, okay, there's no way that that isn't causing serious like hemorrhaging to a budget with all of those people and all the care that has to happen there. And so I don't know if this has happened or not, but one of the things I thought about was I think it might be really helpful to for the question, the person asking the question to sit down with the husband or fiance and actually look at the budget and say like, this is actually what's happening. Because it's one
Right.
thing to say like, oh, this is too much
Mm-hmm.
money. It's another thing
Right.
for it to be like on a ledger in black and white and to see like, oh, we're actually not saving money. We're hemorrhaging our bank account because we're spending $1,700 a month on utilities. And these are the things, this is why we can't go on vacation. This is why we can't do these things. And so I think that building, sort of like showcasing the stakes of what is happening, even just from a financial standpoint, might be really helpful to have the conversation with the fiance. And so if that hasn't happened yet, I would say I would recommend like that's something that happens like ASAP.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think she has a right to say something to them herself? Like if she decides like, you know what, screw this, I'm just going to say something to them. What do you think about that?
She absolutely has a right to,
Mm-hmm.
because one, it's her
It's her
house.
father's
Yeah,
house.
it's like her
Right.
house. They're also becoming family. And so,
Mm-hmm.
this is her family as much as it is his. The difficult part about that is that could come with consequences. Because
Right.
the fiance,
Right.
if he feels very strongly that that shouldn't happen, then
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be a big blow up. And so I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about, because that's where my like therapist brain goes to. I'm like, I wonder like what the cultural makeup of this family is, and
Yes.
like and wondering like where those values come from in terms of like how did it get to be okay to have
Mm-hmm.
all of these people in one house, and then
Right.
like what are their expectations and values that these other family members have that
Mm-hmm.
that influences their feeling like they can just stay there and not contribute financially. And so
Yeah.
there might have to be some like negotiation between like the differences of the values that may exist between like this, 20 something young woman and these older parents and maybe their values when it comes to money and all these other sort of things.
Yeah. And so I guess I would just encourage people before in advance to have these kind of
Hmm.
conversations in relationships
Hmm.
because I think it's important to see like, in the event of an emergency, like, do you want your family to stay here? How long do they
For
stay?
sure.
And then somebody just has to put their foot down
Hmm.
about it. It's just like we can't go from 1 year to 6 years. And I think that 6 years, it's like, I guess it's sort of like that thing of you teach people how to treat you. So
Hmm.
then the sister sees this happening and
Of
she's just like,
course.
well, she's like, I'm just breaking up with my boo and I'm coming over there because that's what that
Because
house
it's
is
okay.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. That was very complicated. I was just like, I was like, whoa,
Yeah. And can I add another little thing?
please do.
Okay.
Please
So
do.
there was another thing that stood out to me that I actually like underlined when I was looking at this. And in the question, it said, we've said we want our space. And I was like, huh,
Oh.
well, it sounds like the writer has said, I want and need space. But it seems like the fiance
Mm-hmm.
is pushing back on that to some degree.
Okay.
But the
Right.
writer says, we've said we want our space. I'm like, well, did you? Is that something you agreed
Right.
on? Is that
Right.
something
But
right?
right. In the next sentence, he says he's not bothered by it.
Right. And so I was confused and I was like, well, I wonder if there's actually like a communication breakdown between the two of them about this whole thing
Mm-hmm.
and like how to make sense
Right.
of it. Because those are two different
Yeah,
ideas.
they are. It's like you may have said you wanted your space, but I don't know that if he's on board. Or maybe he wants his space, but I know some people who are like that. It's like, I'd prefer that my family not live here, but they're here and this is what we do.
Yeah, true. The Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to add is that, so there's this concept in psychology that and learning that's called learned helplessness. And essentially what happens is that if you, I guess, if you don't hold people accountable, if you don't create structure, if you don't create expectations for people, what ends up happening is that people learn actually how to be effectively helpless.
Oh my God.
And so
I think I'm guilty.
yeah. And so what you actually end up doing as this person who can see what is happening and, you're being frustrated with the person not doing things and all this other sort of stuff is that you're actually crippling them by not holding them to standards because they don't have the opportunity to kind of rise to the occasion.
Wow.
And so so in terms of, the writer and her fiance, I was thinking about this idea of like, I wonder in what ways you have done this over these years to actually exacerbate the problem. And I think that's how you get from 1 year to 6 years. That's how you get from 3 extra people to like 4 or 5 extra people.
By simply not holding people accountable.
Yep.
But I think, Jor-El, that is so hard to do sometimes for people is that they'd rather just say nothing and just deal with it and stew on the inside, or they don't know how to hold people accountable. It's like, well, if I set this date, so like where was everybody when the 1 year mark hit, or was there a 90-day countdown?
Right.
And I think sometimes we worry of like, oh, this is going to hurt this or that person's feeling. I just was having a conversation today with someone and I was like, you know what? One of the best things I ever did for one of my close friends was stop helping her. Like one day she wrote me and was like, I had agreed to like, help pay these bills and do these things. And then one day I was just like, you know what? This has gone on for so long and this isn't helping. And one day I stopped. And then the minute I stopped, she started to take care of herself in real life. It is. Yep. But I think it was that breaking point of like, she's going to be upset with me for the moment, she's going to be angry for the moment, but she's also going to figure out how to fend for herself. And why am I denying her that opportunity?
Yeah. Right. And that's in the letter too. There's a part about like not wanting to sound like a B word. And I was like, well, you kind of don't get to decide that if you want to hold people accountable.
Right. Because sometimes that's just how people feel about you.
It's true.
It's okay. Yep. My dad has said that to me. It's like, people are probably going to think you're this. I'm like, well, that's on them. You know what? Because I can't control how people feel positively or negatively about me. That it's all based on how they feel about themselves. So I love that learned helplessness. I wrote that down because I think that, because I want to look it up some more too. Okay. Do you want to get into this next question? This next one was like kind of broke my heart a little bit, was definitely challenging. I recall sitting up for just like a long time, Googling, trying to research and see how everything goes. But definitely she asked me to keep everything anonymous and I totally will. But she says, a few weeks ago, I started what I thought would be my dream job for this stage in my career. However, things have not been going anything like I hoped. Much of this has to do with an embarrassing health issue that has come seemingly out of the blue. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on, but to say the least, it is resulting in a very strong body odor. Funny, perhaps. Well, not for me, LOL. I've been to the doctor. I've been prescribed medicine that didn't help, tried home remedies, Googled everything on the planet, and yet I'm still dealing with the smell. I found people online who suffer from conditions such as TMAU, which I looked up, who have extreme body odor that is largely uncontrollable. While I'm not sure if that's what I'm experiencing, either way, until I figure out what is going on and get a solution, I feel just as helpless. This issue has destroyed my confidence. I'm in a position where I have to present and be in contact with lots of departments and clients on a regular basis. However, I feel like I haven't been able to develop relationships, which is critical to my job because of it. I constantly notice people covering their noses, clearing their throats, or just appearing uncomfortable around me. In meetings and events, I notice that people avoid being near me, and if they have to, again, they'll be thumbing their noses. No one has said anything directly to me, but I can read people and environments well. I've even overheard a client talking about my odor so that I could hear them. I called out once and explained this confusing situation to my supervisor. She graciously covered for me that one time, but indirectly let me know that business is business. So I know I can't let it happen again. So she just had to deal with the smell and I with the embarrassment. Though I'm pushing myself to overcome my social anxiety, this issue has made me even more awkward and isolated. I try to keep conversations short and keep physical distance. Though there's always a work event to attend, I never want to go. I've been depressed and my mind has been not focused on work, just on finding a solution to this issue. Over the past few weeks, I've considered quitting several times, but I literally have no one and nothing to fall back on. As much as I hate this situation, being homeless is the one thing that scares me more, LOL. Sorry for the novel, but I'd just like to know if you have any advice for someone in this situation. I feel that I would grow tremendously at this job. However, things have started on such a low note and it's hard to fake confidence now when I'm so self-conscious. Part of me feels like quitting would be me giving into the fear, but until I can figure out this odor issue, I'm not sure how I'll be able to salvage my reputation with clients or staff so that I can be successful at my job. Any advice or encouragement would be helpful at this point. Thank you. What do you think?
So out of the gate, I just want to say to the person who wrote this, like, thank you for being so candid about this experience.
Yes. Yes, because we need this. I feel like we need to have the conversation.
Yeah, it's I can only imagine what it's like to walk day in and day out with having to think about this, to see the way that people are reacting to you. It's a really difficult situation. And I think that sort of giving us the space to talk about it is like amazing. So I just want to give the writer of this letter props for that, because I know it's not an easy thing to deal with.
Absolutely. Same. Ditto.
So it's a really tough and I think a difficult like circumstance, because it seems like it's pretty recent. This is like a relatively recent development and trying to figure out what is going on. Right. And so I think a lot of what happens next sort of hinges on the right diagnosis as to what's going on. Because, and I don't know if people are familiar with this, but the TMAU is what the person referred to as like maybe something similar. It could be that, which I think it's called, and I don't want to butcher the name, triethylaminoria, which is a condition in which people experience like a strong kind of fishy odor, which is really, really hard to deal with personally. And there's no like cure for it. There are things that can make it better and to manage it more effectively, but things like sweating makes it worse or more noticeable, certain foods and diet and that sort of thing. And so I think that there might be some lifestyle things that could help with that. And it sounds like the writer has tried to do some of that. Right. So the thing that came to my mind was, well, a lot of things sort of hinge on the diagnosis. And so I'm wondering like if it would be helpful to, get a second opinion or seek a specialist who maybe has experience with something like TMAU and see if it actually is that, or if it's something that's reminiscent of that. And I think that someone who specializes in things like that would be, sort of more quick to figure out and discern like what is actually going on.
Oh,
that was one thing.
That was one thing. Something that I thought about, because I did the same thing. The minute that she said this, I started Googling my heart out, and I was like, I can't imagine if I were her, I'd be doing the same thing. Like, it's so difficult to focus when you're trying to do something. But I think when I think about like shame, and, this is something that you cannot control. And I think sometimes like what I love so much about the fact that she wrote me is that she literally educated me on something that I was completely ignorant about, and probably helped develop some sort of sensitivity to things, right? So it's like, instead of going places now and being like, oh my God, so-and-so stinks, that's going to be in my mind like this person could have some sort of disorder that is out of their control that I don't need to make them feel bad about, right? And so I think sometimes, and I don't know how comfortable somebody would feel with this, but just coming out and saying it, you know what I mean? Of just like kind of just hosting a little like after work something, or talking to your supervisor and saying, can I just get 15 minutes of everyone's time to sort of educate them on what I'm going through? That way people know, because there's no reason to walk around feeling ashamed, or, like it's not a secret because it's not going to let you keep
Exactly.
a secret.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I feel like something is hanging over my head, coming out with it, just straight up saying it and just letting people know, it's like, and then getting that sympathy. Like, I can't imagine that the people who are holding their noses and walking away, if maybe they knew, it's like being able to see your personality over, because I'm pretty sure you're not being yourself because you're from a distance, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like having a conversation, and like she said, business is business, but it's like, maybe can I just get 10 or 15 minutes of everyone's time, or just send that, like, get permission, can I just send an email blast so I can let people know what I'm going through? I don't know. That might be over the top, but that's just kind of how I feel.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it depends on, like, it could be a really good idea depending on who this person is and how they live. You know what I mean? Like, if they have that perspective of like, oh, this will solve a lot of things and I don't need to feel shame about it, so I can just go ahead and come out with it. I think that obviously some people would be more comfortable with that than others.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I think that, so I kept going back to, like you said, the idea of shame that's connected to it and how this has impacted this person's interactions with people. And that's likely something that's going to continue, sort of this disruption in like that normal social functioning. And so I think that actually therapy would be a good place to carve out some ways in which you can manage that and change some things behaviorally. Because if this is a condition that doesn't have a cure or isn't going to be resolved, and even if it is, the effects of this experience might linger for a while, right? Like, it can change you to have this kind of experience where you see people reacting to you this way. And so even after it's resolved, you still may feel that self-conscious. And, it's kind of like if someone who's been like very overweight, for most of their life, and then they lose the weight and like they look great, they feel good, but then there's also that part of them that still thinks of themselves as being this bigger, heavier person. And so that doesn't just go away because the physicality changes. And so like, I think being able to like sit in a space with a therapist and sort of talk through those things and that side, and talk through the shame, and talk through maybe potential strategies to deal with the social anxiety part of it would be really, really helpful, because those are skills that maybe this person didn't have to develop before because this thing just sort of like sprung up. And so like you don't know how to deal with something like that. And I think that could go a long way with countering that feeling of being helpless and not knowing what to do.
Yeah, that was good. I did think I also thought like therapy, and I think even in my Googling, therapy was one of the suggestions. But like you said, because it's almost like even after let's just say this does go away, this is lingering, like these feelings, and every time someone says, I know, I can judge people's reactions, and it's just like, not to say that it's not true, but sometimes that's in our head because we know what's going on. Like say someone comes towards you and then they run away and you think it's you, and it's like, oh, they realize they left their cell phone in the bathroom or something, and it's just, so I think that was easily probably one of the most challenging questions I've gotten. But I do appreciate you coming and helping me with that. I know that you weren't prepared to answer this because I was just thinking about it, but I don't know if I talked to you about this the last time, but I was like, with the holidays coming up, I feel like it's difficult. Like everybody doesn't have that like lovely, wonderful family to like go home to. And I just wondered like, sort of like if they're, and I'm putting you on the spot, but just like, I felt like a fire round of like, if there's somebody dealing with like loss this holiday season, if there's some tips that maybe you have, or if there's someone who has like sort of a fractured family and maybe they don't want to go home this year. I guess those are just my top two of like any loss and maybe fracture family, sort of how to, I feel like holidays are challenging for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
for sure. And it's definitely something that, you know, in the therapy industry, we talk about quite a bit. We all kind of like brace ourselves to say, all right, it's like the holidays are coming. So we need to make sure that
Mhm.
we're like really supporting people and, identifying people who might have a more difficult time because of family issues and that sort of thing.
Right. Or, and like, how can
Yeah.
we help people?
Yeah.
That
Yeah, for
too.
sure. So I go back to one of the things I think that we talked about the last time. And that's just this idea that you do have the right to do what's going to work best for you, right? And so
Right.
if
Yes.
you are if you have a really strained relationship with your family for whatever reason, and there has been that discord and that disconnection, and you don't feel like you want to go home and you don't want to spend time, maybe actually, let me back up and rephrase. Maybe that isn't even considered your home. But, if
Mm.
that isn't the place where you feel comfortable, then, I think it's perfectly reasonable and acceptable to allow yourself the freedom to not make that choice to go. And so I think
Right.
that, that is like culturally can be very difficult for a lot of people, right?
Yep.
Because there's these
Yep.
expectations and all these values come into play
Yep.
that you should be doing this, you should have a good relationship with so and so, like, and
Right.
that like that's all well and good, but at the same time, it's like if there are things that caused really big disruptions in your family, let's say your father didn't come to your wedding. You
Mm.
suffered
Mm-hmm.
abuse at the hands of a sibling. You like
Right.
all these things that have happened. Like that doesn't mean you have to be okay with being back there. Like you get to say like, no,
Right.
actually, I don't feel comfortable here. And especially if people aren't trying to work through those things. Like you don't have to go and pretend
Right.
that nothing has happened. That's actually really unhealthy. And it's going to put your mental health in danger.
Right. I think and I loved when you said that the last time, is like, you have a right to do what's best
Yeah.
for you, and I feel like so often, I remember like there was this time where I had spent, I think up until maybe 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I think after I started therapy, like I had spent every single Christmas with my mom. Every single Christmas. And my parent, post divorce, after my parents divorced, and my brother was gone. He was in the military. I felt like obligated to spend that
Mm,
holiday with her, because who does
right.
she have? She doesn't have my dad. She doesn't have, my brother. Like, who does she have? And then I just was like, but that's not how I want to spend my
Right.
Christmas. Like, I don't know. I guess I was like, I want some different memories for
Right.
myself. And I remember like the very first time I was just like, I'm not coming home. There was two iterations of it. It was the first time when I said, I'm not coming home. That was pre-therapy. And then there was another one where it was like, I'm coming home, but I'm not staying
Hmm.
with you. That was
Yeah.
another. That one was hard, because I remember like weeks, like from the summer
Yeah.
leading up, I was like, how am I going to say this
Yeah.
to her? It was just this thing of like, I wanted to, and what I ended up doing was I wanted to go back home to LA, but I just didn't. I was like, I want to have a different
Hmm.
Christmas experience, And what I invited her to do was came to LA. I got a hotel room. I got us a hotel room in LA, and she came and stayed with me on
Hmm.
Christmas Eve. So I kind of got to go home, hang out with friends, kick it. And then Christmas Eve, she stayed with me in my hotel room. We got up in the morning. I had like a gift
Yeah.
for her, one gift, which was change, one gift. And then we ordered room service. And you know what? She
Right.
liked it. And I think I was so afraid to like change things up, or to say, I don't want to do Christmas your
Hmm.
way. That's like taking a knife
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
mom's heart. I'm no longer interested in
Yeah.
your Christmas, And then I feel like over the years we have since, now we've taken it a step further. I've gotten us
Hmm.
separate hotel
Right.
rooms.
Right.
And that has just been like, and you know what? She has enjoyed that too, because I will go off and like I get together with my dad, and then she'll invite her friends, and they'll have brunch, and so she'll go to the spa, and so I think it just took time to kind of say, as an adult, I want to create my own memories, and I want them to be like this without, I don't want to hurt her. So how do I like ease her into this? And I felt, and I don't know, I felt like I wanted to include her, it's like, it's not that I don't want to spend Christmas with you, Mom. I don't want to spend it that way.
Yeah. And I think that's something actually that a lot of us deal with. I know that as I've gotten older, that's also been a thing that's, happened for me. Like I relocated from North Carolina to New York City, and I'm the only one of my family that's here. Right. And Oh, wow. So it's like, if I want to spend holidays with family members, I'm the one who has to come. Right. And so it is, I think it's okay as you grow up to say like, yeah, I do want to switch things up. I want to do something a little bit different, because in a way it also is the natural order of things. Like whether you have, like you grow up, you become an adult, you have kids of your own or family of your own or not, it is still the natural order of things for you to develop your own experiences, traditions, things that you want to do, because you're finding out what your own values are. And, and so maybe it's not important for you to be in the city or the town or whatever where you grew up in. Maybe it's just important that you spend time with your parents for the holidays on some level.
Right.
And maybe that's what's most important, and the other stuff doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Right. And that's really what it was. And so I've even taken it, and I'm like telling all my business, but I've even taken it a step further. I said this before, where I finally have graduated to the place where my parents are divorced. My parents have like no beef whatsoever. And I would always like separate them. I'd spend 1 week with my mom, 1 week with my dad, and then I just decided, you know what? It's Thanksgiving. I bought a home. And so I'm going to have everybody here. And we did it at Christmas, and it worked. It's like fabulously. Like my dad came, my mom came, and it was like old times. I was like, wow, this was nice. And I was like, I kind of felt selfish. Like, this is the holiday I've always been wanting to have.
Yeah.
And I remember being so afraid to call them both and say, hey, Dad, I called my dad first. I was like, I want to host Christmas at my house, but I want you to be here and I want Mom to be here. And you know what? He was like, cool. And I was like, what? And I called my mom, and she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. I had just been, I don't know how long.
You'd worked it up for in your mind.
30, yeah. Yeah. I had worked it up, and then I called them, and they were both like, yeah, that's cool. And I'm like, dang. So now we are going to spend Thanksgiving together. So Christmas was last year, and I'm just like, wow, how cool is it at my age to finally kind of get what I want?
And that's the really like powerful thing about that, is that like if you step outside of what you've always done and you take a little bit of a risk, like you actually create the opportunity to feel like that. You create the opportunity to get all the things that you want. Right? Otherwise you don't even have the option.
No. And you're just like, I just was like, I can't go through another holiday feeling bad or not happy, and it just, I didn't want that. So, but it took me a while. And I guess the other one we were, lost. I have a friend who recently lost her sister. I just, how can some people, like, what can we do to support our friends, I guess, who are going to spend, their first holiday, experiencing loss?
I think that by far and large, like when it comes to the holidays, loss is one of the things that people have a really, really hard time with, because there's nothing like being at, Christmas Eve dinner or Christmas Day celebration or whatever holiday, you celebrate, and then recognizing there's an empty chair, right? Like there's nothing that can fix that. And I think that the best thing that we can do as like friends or family members, loved ones, is to just try our best to be present for people and remind them and that we're thinking about them and actually check up on them. Right. And send that text, give them a call, let them know that you're thinking about them. And I also think that one of the things I personally find really good to do around loss in particular, especially around holidays or like anniversaries of like deaths and things like that, is to actually create an experience that honors that person
Oh,
explicitly, right? So
okay.
if they're, and some people might think it's a little weird, that's all right. But
Uh-huh.
instead of trying to pretend like it hasn't happened, that you haven't lost, I think it's
Yeah.
actually better to kind of lean into it and then
Okay.
create an experience to say, like, you know, you can wake up on Christmas Day, for instance, and say, like, I really miss, I think you said your friend lost her sister,
Yeah.
right? Like, I really miss my sister. One of the things that she loved most about Christmas was like making the eggnog. And so,
Mhm.
like having that consciousness of like when you're making the eggnog that you're acknowledging that this batch is for her, that
Oh,
you
yeah.
like that you do things like that that honor that person, that if there's an empty chair at the table where this person always sat, like
Mhm.
make it, put a place setting there, put something in
Mhm.
that chair, adorn it, make sure that that person, you still feel connected to that person, because even though they aren't physically there, they're still very much present for you, right? And so I think that
Yeah.
like doing something to honor that is a really a nice thing to do. And the other thing that comes to my mind is like, especially if people are going back to places they grew up, or things like that. If the person that if your loved one is now gone and they were connected to places there, like visit that place while you're there.
Mhm. Okay.
Spend a moment just in quiet reflection at like their favorite restaurant or this site that they like really enjoyed, and just give
Okay.
yourself that moment. I think that's a nice thing to do.
That's awesome. I know. I just sometimes I have had friends who have experienced loss, and one of the things, like I remember telling my mom, like I don't know what to say. Like one of my close girlfriends lost her husband suddenly. He went out of town with friends and like just dropped dead there. And I remember like calling my mom and saying, I know I need to call her, but I don't know what to say. And you know what my mom said? Call her and say that.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm calling and I don't have any, like, I don't have any words, but I want you to know that like I'm thinking about you. I'm here for you. And sometimes that's all you can do. And I have been trying to do a better job this year of like when my friend lost her sister, the old my leak in past years would just like
Yeah.
send something really nice. And I've been working more on myself to show up for people. So I went to the funeral.
Yeah.
Like when one of my close friends had a baby, normally I just send a whole bunch of gifts, and like I went and spent like days with her, and I was like, I've got to do a better job at what you said of being present.
Yeah. And what's really ironic about this is that I was actually having a conversation about this with someone like the other day. And we
Mm-hmm.
were talking about that idea of like, what do you do in a situation like that when someone's grieving? And I actually
Mm-hmm.
said, I was like, you know what? You don't do anything.
Yeah.
You sit there. You sit there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you be present. And so like we often, I think, man, we so often we try to do so much. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the best thing that we can do is nothing.
Wow.
If you can just, if your friend is hurting, if someone is grieving, uh,
Mm-hmm.
all of the stories I've ever heard, and with personal experience I've had, is I never remember what people did. I don't remember, what they necessarily what they sent. I don't remember, you know, um, these gestures that they did, aside from them sitting next to me and
Mm-hmm.
just like having their hand on my shoulder.
Mm.
You never forget that. And
Yeah.
so I think that if that's, and not even saying anything.
Right.
And so I think that like for grief in particular, I think that's like the most powerful thing you can do, is just to be present and just to sit with someone. And if you don't know what to say, just like you did, say, you know what, I'm not sure what to say. All I know is I love you and I'm sorry that you're hurting. I'm here.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Jor-El, you always come through. You always come through for me, and I want to thank you so much. But before you go,
Yeah.
please tell us how to find you.
Sure. I'm kind of all over the place, so you can catch me
Right.
out on Twitter at
Okay.
Jor-El Caraballo. My website is jorelcaraballo.com.
And I'll put that in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah. So feel free to tweet me, follow, send questions.
Yes.
I'm in New York State. So if people want to talk about, maybe reaching out for services, you can send me an
Yeah.
email and
Okay.
I'll definitely respond. Or if you just have questions that like
Hmm.
about therapy or about mental health stuff that you want to get some quick feedback on, I'm happy to offer what I can.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate you so much. Thank you, and I hope to have you back again.
of course. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.